The dusty streets of Gila City, Arizona Territory, stretched out before Nathan Pierce like a lonely promise as he stood outside the general store that sweltering afternoon in June 1878, staring at the pink Raffle ticket clutched in his weathered hand and wondering what possessed him to throw away $3 whole on something as foolish as winning a bride. The sun beat down mercilessly on the small mining town that had sprung up along the Gila River, and Nathan pulled his hat lower over his eyes as he watched other men filing into the saloon where the drawing would take place. He had not planned on participating in such a spectacle when he rode into town that morning for supplies. His homestead 15 miles north needed fence posts, nails, and seed more than he needed the company of strangers gawking at some poor woman who had agreed to this arrangement. But Tobias Jenkins from the neighboring claim had shoved the ticket into his hand with a crooked grin and insisted he take a chance. A man cannot live on beans and solitude forever, Tobias had said, and Nathan supposed there was truth in that. 3 years he had worked that land alone, breaking his back to coax crops from the stubborn soil, building a cabin with his own 2 hands, and talking to no one but his horse for days on end. The loneliness had become a physical weight pressing on his chest some nights as he lay in his narrow bed listening to coyotes howl in the darkness. Inside the saloon, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of unwashed bodies. Nathan pushed his way through the crowd of men, most of them miners and drifters with more hope than sense. At the front of the room stood Reverend Mills, a portly man with thinning hair who seemed uncomfortable with his role in this unorthodox union. Beside him sat a locked box containing all the ticket stubs. "Gentlemen, if I may have your attention," the Reverend called out, raising his hands for quiet. The rumble of conversation died down to expectant murmurs. "As you all know, Miss Evelyn Warner of St. Louis, Missouri has graciously agreed to relocate to our territory in search of a husband. The young lady lost her family in a fire last winter and finds herself without prospects or protection in the city. Our arrangement, while unusual, offers her a fresh start and one of you the blessing of matrimony." Nathan felt a twist of sympathy in his gut. The poor woman must be desperate indeed to agree to such terms. He glanced around at the rough faces surrounding him, men who spent their days in dark mine shafts or driving cattle, men who rarely bathed and could barely write their own names. What kind of life awaited her here? "The stage is due within the hour," Reverend Mills continued. "I will draw the winning ticket now, and the lucky gentleman will meet his intended bride when she arrives. I must remind you all that this is a binding commitment. Whoever wins is expected to marry the young lady within the week and provide for her as a Christian husband should." The Reverend reached into the box and stirred the tickets around with theatrical flair. Nathan's heart began to pound despite himself. He told himself he did not care, that he was better off alone, that he had only bought the ticket to get Tobias to stop pestering him. But some small voice in the back of his mind whispered that maybe, just maybe, this could be the answer to the crushing isolation that made him dread each sunset. The Reverend's hand emerged with a single pink ticket. He unfolded it slowly, squinting at the number written inside. "Number 47. Nathan looked down at his own ticket. The number 47 stared back at him in black ink. His ears began to ring as the men around him groaned in disappointment. Someone clapped him hard on the shoulder. Tobias was whooping with laughter somewhere to his left. Nathan stood frozen, unable to believe his luck or perhaps his misfortune. "Come forward, sir." Reverend Mills beckoned him with an impatient wave. "Let us see who our winner is." Nathan's legs carried him through the crowd without conscious thought. He handed over his ticket with numb fingers while the Reverend examined it and declared him the official winner. Hands shook his, voices congratulated him, and someone pressed a shot of whiskey into his hand which he downed without tasting. The next hour passed in a blur of preparation and instruction from Reverend Mills about proper courtship, even in such irregular circumstances, about treating the young lady with respect and dignity, about the wedding ceremony that would take place the following Saturday. Then the call came that the stage had been spotted on the road into town. Nathan found himself standing in the street with what seemed like half of Gila City gathered to witness the spectacle. His hands were sweating. He wiped them on his trousers and immediately regretted it, worried he looked like some uncouth savage. He had not even had time to shave or change his shirt. Dust from the trail still caked his boots and the hem of his pants. The stagecoach rattled into view, pulled by 6 exhausted horses. The driver brought them to a halt in front of the saloon with a spray of dirt and gravel. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened, and a small gloved hand appeared, grasping the frame. The woman who stepped down from the stage was not what Nathan expected, though he could not have said exactly what he had been expecting. She was younger than he had imagined, perhaps 22 or 23, with auburn hair pinned up beneath a sensible traveling hat. Her dress was plain brown cotton, dusty from the journey, and she carried a single worn carpetbag. But it was her face that struck him, pale and heart-shaped, with a determined set to her jaw that suggested she was far more frightened than she wanted anyone to know. Her eyes, a remarkable shade of green, swept over the crowd and landed on Reverend Mills. "I am Evelyn Warner," she announced in a clear voice that carried despite its slight tremor. "I was told someone would meet me here. Yes, yes, my dear Miss Warner." The Reverend bustled forward, taking her elbow with practiced gentleness. "Welcome to Gila City. Your journey must have been arduous." "It was long," she agreed, and Nathan heard the exhaustion beneath her composed exterior. How many days had she spent in that cramped coach, rattling across the country to meet a stranger who had won her like a prize at a county fair? "Allow me to introduce Mr. Nathan Pierce," Reverend Mills said, gesturing toward Nathan. "He is the fortunate winner of our raffle and will be your intended husband." Evelyn's green eyes turned to Nathan, and he felt himself being assessed with an intelligence that made him straighten his shoulders instinctively. She was several inches shorter than him, even in her button-up boots, and there was a delicacy to her features that seemed at odds with the strength he sensed beneath her surface. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other while the crowd watched with avid interest. Then Evelyn stepped forward and extended her hand. "Mr. Pierce, I am pleased to make your acquaintance." Nathan took her hand carefully, aware of how rough his own palm must feel against her gloved fingers. "Miss Warner, welcome to the territory." Her lips curved into something that might have been a smile if it had reached her eyes. "Thank you. I hope I will not be too much of a burden." "No burden at all, madam," Nathan managed, though his tongue felt thick and clumsy in his mouth. "I have a homestead north of here. It is not much, but it is solid and the land is good." "I am sure it will be fine," Evelyn said, though her voice suggested she had no idea what she was agreeing to. Reverend Mills cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should get Miss Warner settled at the boarding house for now. She will need a few days to rest and recover from her journey before the wedding. It would not be proper for her to stay at your homestead unchaperoned, Mr. Pierce." "Of course," Nathan agreed quickly, relief flooding through him. He needed time to prepare, to make his cabin presentable for a woman, to figure out what in God's name he was supposed to say to this person, who would soon be his wife. The crowd began to disperse, disappointed that there would be no further entertainment. Nathan collected Evelyn's carpet bag from the stage driver and walked beside her to the boarding house, acutely aware of her presence at his elbow. She moved with a fluid grace despite her obvious fatigue, her spine straight and her chin up, as though she were walking into a ballroom rather than a dusty frontier boarding house. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the establishment, fussed over Evelyn like a mother hen, clicking her tongue at the dust on her dress and promising a hot bath and a good meal. Nathan lingered awkwardly in the entryway until Evelyn turned back to him. "Will I see you tomorrow, Mr. Pierce?" she asked. "Yes, madam. I will come by in the afternoon if that suits you. We should talk before the wedding." Something flickered in her eyes. Was it fear or relief? "That would be appreciated." Nathan touched the brim of his hat and fled before he could make more of a fool of himself. That night, alone in his cabin with the coyotes singing their lonely songs, Nathan could not sleep. He kept seeing those green eyes assessing him, kept wondering what she truly thought when she looked at him. Did she see a decent man trying to make an honest living, or just another rough homesteader who did not know how to talk to a lady? He rose before dawn and threw himself into work with manic energy. He scrubbed the cabin from top to bottom, discovering dirt in corners he had not noticed in months. He fixed the squeaky hinge on the door, patched a leak in the roof, and built a second shelf in the bedroom for her things. The cabin was small, just 2 rooms, the main living area with the kitchen and fireplace, and the bedroom barely large enough for the bed he had built from rough-hewn logs. There was no glass in the windows, only wooden shutters to keep out the weather. The furniture consisted of a table, 2 chairs, a chest for storage, and little else. Looking at it with fresh eyes, Nathan felt a wave of inadequacy. What woman from St. Louis, even one down on her luck, would want to live in such primitive conditions? But it was all he had. He had spent every dollar he possessed on this land, on seed and tools and livestock. There was no money for luxuries or refinements. On his second morning of frantic preparation, Tobias rode up and surveyed the flurry of activity with amusement. "You are going to work yourself to death before you even get married," he observed, watching Nathan whitewash the exterior walls. "The place needs to be decent for a woman," Nathan replied shortly, not pausing in his work. "Have you thought about what you are going to say to her when you see her again?" Nathan had thought of little else, but no words seemed adequate. "I will figure it out." "Women like to be talked to," Tobias said helpfully. "They like to know what you are thinking. And you are such an expert on women. As I recall, you are as unmarried as I was yesterday." Tobias grinned. "True enough, but I had a wife once before the fever took her. And I can tell you, the worst thing you can do is clam up like an old rock. You have got to open up to her, let her see who you are." The advice settled uneasily in Nathan's chest. Opening up had never been his strong suit. He had learned early to keep his thoughts to himself, to present a stoic face to the world no matter what storms raged inside. But perhaps Tobias had a point. If he and Evelyn were to build any kind of life together, there would need to be honesty between them. That afternoon, Nathan rode into Gila City with his stomach in knots. He had shaved carefully, put on his one good shirt, and even attempted to tame his dark hair with water, though it had dried wild again in the heat. He found Evelyn in the boarding house parlor, sitting in a chair by the window with a book in her lap. She wore a different dress today, a faded blue calico that had seen better days but was clean and neatly pressed. She looked up when he entered, and he was struck again by how lovely she was, even with shadows of exhaustion still lingering under her eyes. "Mr. Pierce, good afternoon. Miss Warner." He removed his hat and turned it in his hands, suddenly feeling like an oversized bull in a china shop. "I thought perhaps we could take a walk, if you are feeling up to it. There is not much to see, but I could show you around the town." Evelyn set her book aside and rose with what seemed like relief. "I would like that very much. I have been cooped up in coaches and rooms for so long. I think I might go mad if I do not move about." They stepped out into the afternoon sun, and Nathan offered his arm with awkward formality. Evelyn's hand rested lightly on his forearm, a touch he felt even through the fabric of his sleeve. They walked slowly down the main street, such as it was a collection of rough buildings housing the saloon, general store, blacksmith, and a few other establishments. "It is smaller than I expected," Evelyn said, and Nathan could not tell if she was disappointed or simply making an observation. "Gila City is not much more than a mining camp that got ambitious," he admitted. "Most of the people here are transient, following the silver strikes, but there are some of us trying to put down roots, build something permanent. And you are a homesteader." "Yes, madam. I claimed 160 acres under the Homestead Act. I have been working it for 3 years now. Another 2 and it will be mine free and clear, assuming I can prove up on it." "What do you grow?" "Corn, mostly. Some wheat. I've got a vegetable garden and a few chickens. 3 cows and a horse. It is not a fortune, but it is honest work and it is mine." Evelyn was quiet for a moment, her eyes fixed on the distant mountains that ringed the valley. "I want you to know, Mr. Pierce, that I am not afraid of hard work. I may not know much about farming, but I can learn. I can cook and clean and sew. I will earn my keep." The words were delivered with a fierce pride that made Nathan's chest tighten. "I did not win you in that raffle to get a servant, Miss Warner. I am looking for a partner, someone to share my life with." She looked up at him with surprise, and he saw hope flicker in those green eyes before she shuddered it away. "That is a nice sentiment, Mr. Pierce, but let us be honest about what this is. You wanted a wife. I needed security. This is a practical arrangement, nothing more." Her bluntness should have relieved him, but instead it stung. "Is that what you want, a practical arrangement?" "I want to survive," Evelyn said quietly. "Everything else is luxury." They had reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open scrubland dotted with mesquite and prickly pear. Nathan stopped and turned to face her fully. "What happened to your family, if you do not mind me asking?" Pain flashed across her face, there and gone in an instant. "There was a fire in our building. My parents and younger brother did not make it out. I was visiting a friend that night, which is the only reason I am still here. I am sorry." "Thank you." She swallowed hard. "My father was a clerk. We did not have much, but we got by. After the fire, I had nothing. No family, no money, no prospects. A woman alone in the city faces limited options, and most of them are not respectable." Nathan understood what she was not saying, the desperate circumstances that would drive a woman to agree to marry a complete stranger on the frontier. "You are safe now," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "I promise you that, at least. Whatever else this arrangement is or is not, you will be safe with me." Evelyn searched his face for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether she could believe him. Finally, she nodded. "I appreciate that, Mr. Pierce, truly." They walked back to the boarding house in a silence that felt less awkward than before, as if some small understanding had been reached between them. At the door, Nathan hesitated, wanting to say more but not knowing how. "I will come by tomorrow," he said finally. "And the next day and the next, until the wedding. So we can get to know each other a bit before we are tied together for life." "I would like that," Evelyn said, and this time her smile reached her eyes. True to his word, Nathan rode into town every afternoon that week. He brought Evelyn small gifts, wildflowers picked from the meadow near his cabin, a ribbon he bought from the general store, a smooth stone from the river that caught the light in interesting ways. They were simple things, but her face lit up each time, as if he had given her something precious. They talked as they walked, slowly peeling back the layers that strangers wore. Nathan told her about his childhood in Missouri, how he had lost his own parents to cholera when he was 17, how he had worked as a ranch hand for years before saving enough to file his own claim. Evelyn spoke of life in St. Louis, the books she loved to read, her skill with a needle, her mother's recipe for apple pie. With each conversation, Nathan felt something shift inside him. This woman was not just a solution to his loneliness or a helper for his homestead. She was intelligent and brave, with a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard and made him laugh. She asked thoughtful questions about his land, about his plans for the future, and listened to his answers with genuine interest. On the 5th day, Nathan brought her out to see the homestead. They rode his horse together. Evelyn perched side saddle in front of him with his arms bracketing her to hold the reins. The proximity made his heart race, and he was acutely aware of her warmth against his chest, the scent of lavender soap in her hair. The cabin looked better than it ever had, freshly whitewashed and neat as a pin. Nathan had even planted flowers beside the door, transplanting wild columbines from the creek. As they approached, he tried to see it through her eyes and prayed she would not be too disappointed. Evelyn slid down from the horse before he could help her and stood looking at the cabin with an unreadable expression. Nathan's stomach knotted with anxiety as he waited for her verdict. "You built this yourself?" she asked finally. "Yes, madam. It took me the better part of 6 months, working in between getting the fields planted and cleared." She walked to the door and ran her hand along the frame, feeling the smooth wood where he had sanded and shaped it. "It is sturdy. I wanted it to last," Nathan said. "Not just some thrown-together shack that would fall apart in the first strong wind." Evelyn turned to face him with something like wonder in her expression. "May I see inside?" He opened the door and gestured for her to enter. She stepped over the threshold slowly, taking in the sparse but clean interior. She examined the fireplace with its iron cooking crane, the shelves he had built, the table and chairs. Then she moved to the bedroom door and peeked inside at the bed with its log frame and corn husk mattress covered by a patchwork quilt. "Where did you get the quilt?" she asked. "I made it," Nathan admitted, feeling his face heat. "I know it is not fine work, but it keeps warm in the winter." Evelyn moved closer to examine the stitching, her fingers tracing the uneven seams. "You made this. I told you I am not much good at the fine work." To his astonishment, her eyes were shining with unshed tears when she looked up at him. "Mr. Pierce, do you have any idea how remarkable this is? You built a home with your own 2 hands. You created everything here from nothing. It is extraordinary." Her words hit him like a physical blow, knocking something loose in his chest that he had kept locked up tight for years. "I just did what needed doing." "No," Evelyn said firmly. "You did so much more than that. This place, it has care in every corner. You built this hoping for a future for a family. I can feel it." Nathan found he could not speak past the lump in his throat, so he just nodded. Evelyn walked back into the main room and turned in a slow circle, her skirts swishing around her ankles. "I can make curtains for the windows. And if you can spare some wood, I could build a few more shelves, maybe a proper cupboard for dishes. You know carpentry." She gave him a small smile. "My father taught me when I was young. He always said a person should know how to make and fix things, whether they wore skirts or trousers." He sounds like he was a wise man. He was. The grief was there in her voice, but gentler now, as if sharing the memory had eased its sharp edges. They spent the rest of the afternoon walking the property, Nathan pointing out the boundaries of his claim, the creek that provided water, the fields he had cleared and planted. Evelyn asked intelligent questions about crop rotation and irrigation, about the challenges of farming in such an arid climate. He found himself talking more freely than he had in years, ideas and plans spilling out of him as if her interest had unstoppered a bottle. As the sun began to sink toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, they stood together at the edge of the cornfield. The young plants were knee-high now, their leaves rustling in the evening breeze. "I can see it," Evelyn said softly. "The life you are building here, it is beautiful, Mr. Pierce." "Nathan," he said, his voice rough. "I think you should call me Nathan. We are getting married the day after tomorrow, after all." She looked up at him, her face gilded by the sunset light. "Nathan, then." "And you should call me Evelyn." "Evelyn," he repeated, and the name felt right in his mouth, like something he had been waiting to say all his life. They were standing very close, he realized, near enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, the faint dusting of freckles across her nose. For a wild moment he wanted to kiss her, to close the distance between them and taste her lips. But that would be improper, presumptuous. So instead, he took her hand in his and raised it to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you," he said, "for giving this a chance, for giving me a chance." Evelyn's fingers tightened around his. "Thank you for being a good man." "I was so afraid when I got on that stage, not knowing what would be waiting for me at the other end. But you have been kind and patient and decent. That is more than I dared hope for." The ride back to town seemed to pass in minutes, though the sun had set by the time they arrived, stars beginning to prick through the darkening sky. Nathan helped Evelyn down from the horse and walked her to the boarding house door. They lingered there, neither wanting to part. "I will see you at the church on Saturday," Nathan said. "Yes." Evelyn hesitated, then reached up and touched his cheek gently. "I am glad it was you, Nathan. Of all those men in that saloon, I am glad it was you who won." She slipped inside before he could respond, leaving him standing in the darkness with his heart pounding and hope blooming in his chest like those wildflowers he had planted by the cabin door. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect summer day that made even Gila City look almost pretty. Nathan stood in front of Reverend Mills in the small wooden church, his palms sweating and his stomach in knots. Tobias stood beside him as his witness, grinning like a fool. The church was half full of curious townspeople who had come to see the Raffle bride get married. Then the door opened, and Evelyn walked in on Mrs. Henderson's arm. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. She wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Henderson must have helped her alter from something in her trunk. Her auburn hair was down around her shoulders instead of pinned up, held back by a crown of wildflowers. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. She walked down the short aisle with her head high, but Nathan could see the slight tremor in her hands, the nervousness she was trying so hard to hide. When she reached him, he offered his arm and leaned close to whisper, "You look lovely." Her answering smile steadied them both. Reverend Mills began the ceremony, his voice solemn as he spoke of the sacred bonds of matrimony, of duty and devotion. Nathan barely heard the words. He was too focused on Evelyn's hand resting on his arm, on the way the sunlight streaming through the windows caught in her hair, on the fact that, in a few minutes, this remarkable woman would be his wife. "Do you, Nathan Pierce, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Nathan said, his voice clear and firm. "And do you, Evelyn Warner, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Evelyn looked up at Nathan, her green eyes searching his face. For a heart-stopping moment he thought she might refuse, might run from the church and this hasty marriage to a stranger. But then she smiled, soft and genuine, and said, "I do." Reverend Mills pronounced them man and wife, and Nathan was given permission to kiss his bride. He cupped Evelyn's face gently in his work-roughened hands and touched his lips to hers in the softest, most reverent kiss he could manage. It lasted only a moment, but it sent a shock of warmth straight through him. When they pulled apart, Evelyn's cheeks were flushed pink and her eyes were shining. Nathan offered her his arm, and together they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife. There was a small reception at the boarding house, with cake misses. Henderson had baked and well wishes from the assembled townspeople. Nathan endured the handshakes and congratulations with as much grace as he could muster, but his attention kept returning to Evelyn. She was talking with Mrs. Henderson and a few other women, accepting advice about housekeeping in the territory with patient good humor. Finally, as the afternoon began to wane, Nathan approached her. "Are you ready to go home?" Evelyn nodded, and he saw both excitement and apprehension in her face. They collected her belongings, which still amounted to little more than that single carpet bag, plus a few things Mrs. Henderson had given her as wedding gifts. Nathan loaded everything into the small wagon he had borrowed for the occasion and helped Evelyn up onto the seat. The ride to the homestead was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Nathan's mind was racing ahead, thinking about the night to come, about sleeping in the same bed as this woman who was now his wife. He had been with women before, a few times in his younger days, but this felt different, weighted with significance and responsibility. As they pulled up to the cabin, Nathan noticed Evelyn's hands gripping the edge of the seat tightly. He reached over and covered them with his own. "Evelyn, I want you to know something. I am not going to expect anything from you tonight that you are not ready to give. We have rushed into this marriage quickly enough. The rest can come in its own time." Relief washed over her face so clearly that Nathan's heart ached. "Thank you," she whispered. "I am sorry. I know that as your wife it is my duty to—" "Stop," Nathan interrupted gently. "I do not want duty from you, Evelyn. When we share that bed, I want it to be because we both want to, not because of some obligation." She looked at him with something like awe. "You are a rare man, Nathan Pierce." He helped her down from the wagon and carried her things inside. The cabin was dim in the fading light, and he set about lighting the oil lamps. Evelyn moved around the space with a proprietorial air, examining everything more closely now that this was her home. "I will sleep out in the main room tonight," Nathan said. "You can have the bed." "That is not necessary," Evelyn protested. "The bed is large enough for both of us if we stay on our own sides." Nathan considered this. "If you are comfortable with that, then all right. But I want you to know you can change your mind anytime." They made supper together, a simple meal of beans and cornbread that Evelyn managed with the unfamiliar fireplace better than Nathan expected. They ate at the small table, talking about plans for the homestead, about things that needed doing. It felt almost normal, almost like they had been married for years instead of hours. As full darkness fell, they prepared for bed with awkward formality. Evelyn changed in the bedroom while Nathan waited in the main room, then he went in after she had settled under the quilt. He could see her in the lamplight, lying rigid on the far side of the bed, leaving as much space as possible between them. Nathan blew out the lamp and carefully lay down on his side, maintaining that careful distance. The darkness was complete, broken only by the faint light from the banked fire in the other room filtering through the door. "Nathan," Evelyn's voice came soft in the darkness. "Yes." Thank you for being so patient with me. I know I must seem like a frightened child. You seem like someone who has been through a lot and is trying to make the best of a difficult situation, Nathan said. There is no shame in that. He heard her shift, turning toward him though they were still not touching. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you buy that raffle ticket? You do not seem like the kind of man who would normally participate in such a thing. Nathan was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Tobias pushed me into it, truth be told, but I think some part of me wanted to. I was tired of being alone, tired of coming back to an empty cabin every night. I wanted someone to share this with, to build a life with. Maybe I was just desperate enough to take a chance on fate. And are you disappointed with what fate brought you? Not even a little bit, Nathan said honestly. You are far better than anything I deserved. I am the one who should be asking if you are disappointed. I am not, Evelyn said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. I was terrified on that stagecoach, imagining all the horrible possibilities of what might be waiting. But you have been nothing but kind. You built a home, Nathan. Not just a house, but a real home. I can feel it in every board and nail. That is worth more than all the silver in those mines. Nathan felt that tightness in his chest again, that strange ache that came from feelings too big for his body to contain. We will make it a good home together, he promised. I will do everything in my power to make you happy here. I believe you, Evelyn whispered. They fell silent then, but it was a comfortable silence. Nathan lay awake for a long time, listening to Evelyn's breathing slow and deepen as she drifted into sleep. Only when he was sure she was resting peacefully did he allow himself to follow. The next morning, Nathan woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. He sat up in confusion, momentarily forgetting where he was, before the events of the previous day came flooding back. He dressed quickly and emerged from the bedroom to find Evelyn at the fireplace, cooking breakfast with competent efficiency. She turned when she heard him and smiled. Good morning. I hope I did not wake you. Not at all. You did not have to do this. I wanted to. Besides, we both have work to do today if we are going to make this place a proper home. And work they did. Evelyn threw herself into the task of organizing and improving the cabin with an energy that amazed Nathan. She cleaned things he had not even known were dirty, rearranged the kitchen area for better efficiency, and began planning out the curtains and shelves she wanted to make. Nathan worked on repairing some fence posts that had rotted through, but he found himself constantly glancing back toward the cabin, watching Evelyn move past the windows. They fell into a routine over the following weeks. Nathan worked the land and tended the livestock, while Evelyn managed the household and began her improvement projects. She was as capable as she had promised, learning quickly and never complaining about the primitive conditions or the hard work. In the evenings, they would sit together outside the cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains and talking about everything and nothing. Nathan found himself falling in love with his wife. It was not a sudden thing, not a lightning bolt from the heavens. It was gradual, like water wearing away stone. It was in the way she hummed while she worked, in her laugh when he told a joke, in the fierce concentration on her face when she was sewing. It was in how she had planted a herb garden beside the door, in how she had befriended the chickens and named everyone, in how she asked his opinion about household matters as if his thoughts truly mattered to her. He wanted to tell her, but the words stuck in his throat. What if she did not feel the same? What if she was content with their practical arrangement and did not want the complication of love? Then one evening about a month after their wedding, as they sat outside watching the stars emerge, Evelyn reached over and took his hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it sent Nathan's heart racing. I have been thinking, she said quietly, About what you said on our wedding night about how things could come in their own time. Nathan's mouth went dry. Yes. I think it is time, Evelyn said, turning to look at him with open honesty in her face. If you still want to. I do not want this to be just a practical arrangement anymore, Nathan. I want it to be a real marriage. Are you sure? He asked, searching her face for any sign of doubt or obligation. I am sure. She squeezed his hand. You have been so patient, so kind. You have shown me every day that I can trust you. And somewhere along the way, I started to feel something more than gratitude. I started to care for you, Nathan, truly care for you. The joy that flooded through Nathan was so intense it was almost painful. I care for you too, he said, his voice rough with emotion. More than I know how to say. I wake up every morning grateful that it was my ticket that was drawn, that you are here, that I get to spend my days with you. Evelyn's eyes were shining in the starlight. Then show me, she whispered. Nathan stood and pulled her gently to her feet. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, not with the chaste restraint of their wedding kiss, but with all the longing and tenderness he had been holding back for weeks. Evelyn melted against him, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan lifted her into his arms and carried her into the cabin, into the bedroom where they had slept side by side for weeks without touching. This time, there was no space between them, no careful distance. This time they came together as husband and wife in truth, with tenderness and passion and a sweet discovery of each other. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Evelyn traced patterns on Nathan's chest with her fingertips. I love you, she said softly. I did not think I would, but I do. Nathan pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. I love you too, more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and Nathan thought that this was what true happiness felt like, this perfect contentment, this sense of rightness and belonging. The seasons turned, summer giving way to autumn. The corn was harvested, golden and abundant, and Nathan felt pride knowing he would have enough to sell in town as well as enough to get them through the winter. Evelyn had transformed the cabin into a real home, with curtains in the windows, shelves full of preserves she had put up, and small touches of beauty wherever she could manage them. In late October, Evelyn began to feel unwell in the mornings. At first, Nathan worried she had caught some illness, but when he suggested riding to Tucson to see a doctor, she stopped him with a gentle smile. I do not think a doctor is necessary, she said. I believe I am with child. Nathan stared at her in shock for a long moment before the words penetrated. A child? We are going to have a baby, I think so. It is early yet, but all the signs are there. Nathan swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down before she got dizzy. We are going to have a baby, he repeated wonderingly. Evelyn, that is the best news I have ever heard. You are happy then? She asked, though her smile suggested she already knew the answer. Happy does not begin to cover it, Nathan said, pulling her close and resting his hand over her still flat stomach. A child, our child. They told Tobias when he came to visit the following week, and he celebrated with them, clapping Nathan on the back hard enough to make him stumble. I told you getting married was a good idea, he crowed. Look at you now, about to be a father. As winter set in, Nathan became almost obsessively protective of Evelyn. He would not let her do any heavy work, insisting on handling tasks she had previously managed on her own. She tolerated his hovering with amused patience, though sometimes she had to put her foot down and remind him she was pregnant, not made of glass. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, she said one day when he tried to prevent her from sweeping the floor. I promise you I can manage some basic housework." "I just want to keep you safe," Nathan protested. "Both of you." Evelyn's expression softened and she kissed his cheek. "I know, and I love you for it, but you cannot wrap me in cotton wool for 9 months. We have a homestead to run." They compromised, with Nathan taking on more of the household tasks, while Evelyn focused on lighter work and preparing for the baby's arrival. She spent the long winter evenings sewing tiny clothes and blankets, her face glowing with contentment in the firelight. Christmas came, and though they had little money to spare, they made it special. Nathan rode to Gila City and bought fabric for a new dress for Evelyn, along with peppermints and oranges, luxuries they rarely afforded. Evelyn had made him a new shirt, the stitching so fine and even it put his rough work to shame. They sat together by the fire on Christmas Eve, Evelyn leaning against Nathan with his hand resting on her now rounded belly. The baby kicked against his palm, strong and insistent, and Nathan felt tears prick his eyes at the miracle of it. "What are you thinking?" Evelyn asked softly. "I am thinking about how different my life was a year ago," Nathan said. "I was alone in this cabin, barely surviving, with nothing to look forward to but more of the same. And now I have you and our child on the way, and more happiness than I knew existed in the world." "I was alone too," Evelyn said, grieving and frightened and facing a very dark future. "That raffle seemed like a desperate last chance at survival. I never dreamed it would lead to this, to real love and a real home." "We were both lost," Nathan said, "and somehow we found each other." "Do you believe in fate?" Evelyn asked. Nathan considered the question. "I did not used to. But now I think I must. What else could explain your ticket bringing you here, my ticket being drawn? Out of all the possible ways things could have gone, we found each other. That seems like more than just luck." "I like to think your parents and mine had something to do with it," Evelyn said. "Watching over us from wherever they are, nudging us toward each other." Nathan kissed the top of her head. "If they can see us now, I hope they are happy with what we have built." Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers across the mesa, and Evelyn grew round and ripe as the fruit on the wild plum trees. She moved more slowly now, one hand always cradling her belly, but she never complained. Nathan thought she had never been more beautiful. In late April, the baby decided it was time to make an appearance. Nathan rode to town at breakneck speed to fetch Mrs. Henderson, who had agreed to serve as midwife. The hours that followed were the longest of Nathan's life, pacing outside the cabin while Evelyn labored inside with Mrs. Henderson attending her. Finally, as the sun was setting, he heard the thin, angry wail of a newborn. Mrs. Henderson opened the door with a broad smile. "Congratulations, Mr. Pierce. You have a healthy son." Nathan stumbled into the bedroom to find Evelyn propped up against the pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. He approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe, and looked down at his son. The baby was red and wrinkled, with a tuft of dark hair and his tiny fists waving in the air. He was the most perfect thing Nathan had ever seen. "Do you want to hold him?" Evelyn asked, her voice hoarse from the ordeal. Nathan carefully took the baby into his arms, cradling the small warm weight against his chest. His son. His child. The reality of it crashed over him in a wave of love so intense it brought tears to his eyes. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "Welcome to the world. I am your father, and I promise I will do everything in my power to give you a good life." The baby's eyes opened, unfocused but seeming to look at him, and Nathan felt his heart crack wide open. "What should we name him?" Evelyn asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never settled on anything definite. Now, holding his son, Nathan thought of his own father, a good man who had died too young. "What do you think of Thomas?" after my father." "Thomas Pierce," Evelyn said, testing the name. "I like it." "Thomas James Pierce, if we can use my father's name for the middle." "Thomas James Pierce it is," Nathan agreed. He carried the baby back to Evelyn and settled beside them on the bed, his arm around his wife and his son cradled between them. "Our family, Mrs. Henderson had discreetly left them alone, heading back to town with a promise to check on them in a few days. As night fell and the stars came out, the three of them remained there together, Nathan and Evelyn taking turns holding Thomas, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes, laughing at his expressions. "He has your nose," Evelyn observed. "Poor child," Nathan joked. "Let us hope he gets your intelligence to make up for it. He will have the best of both of us," Evelyn said firmly, "and all the love we can give him." The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Thomas was a good baby for the most part, but he still needed constant care and attention. Evelyn bore the brunt of it, nursing and soothing him, while Nathan tried to help however he could while still managing the farm work that kept them fed. Despite the exhaustion, Nathan had never been happier. He loved watching Evelyn with their son, loved the fierce protectiveness in her eyes, the gentle way she sang to Thomas to settle him. He loved coming in from the fields to find them together, Evelyn nursing the baby while humming softly. These quiet domestic moments felt sacred to him, precious beyond measure. When Thomas was 3 months old, Nathan took him outside for the first time to see the homestead in the golden light of autumn. He walked around the property with his son in his arms, pointing out the fields, the livestock, the mountains in the distance. "All of this will be yours someday," Nathan told him. "This land we have worked so hard for. But more important than the land is the love, Thomas. Never forget that. The love between your mother and me, the love we have for you, that is what makes this place a home." Thomas stared up at him with solemn eyes, and Nathan could have sworn the baby understood every word. That evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset with Thomas sleeping peacefully in Evelyn's arms, she turned to Nathan with a mischievous smile. "I have been thinking." "That is usually dangerous," Nathan teased. She laughed and swatted his arm. "I am serious. I have been thinking about the homestead and what we could do to improve it. I am listening. What if we built an addition to the cabin? Another bedroom for Thomas, and eventually for more children if we are blessed with them. And maybe we could dig a proper well closer to the house, instead of having to haul water from the creek. Oh, and I saw a notice in the general store about a teacher coming to Gila City to start a school. When Thomas is old enough, he should have proper education." Nathan listened to her plans, his heart swelling with love for this woman who had arrived in Arizona territory as a frightened bride and had become the backbone of their family, always thinking ahead, always working to make their lives better. Those are all good ideas. The addition would be the most pressing. I have been thinking the same thing myself. Thomas will not fit in that cradle forever. "Then we are agreed?" Evelyn asked. "We are agreed. I will start gathering materials in the spring and we can begin building when the weather warms up." True to his word, Nathan began work on the addition the following April. Tobias came to help, along with a few other neighbors who had settled in the area. In the territory, people helped each other with big projects, knowing they would need the same assistance someday. The work was hard but satisfying, and Evelyn kept them all fed with hearty meals while keeping an eye on Thomas, who was now crawling and getting into everything. The addition slowly took shape, a bedroom that would give their growing family more space. By summer, the new room was complete, and Evelyn furnished it with a bed she and Nathan built together, along with a chest for Thomas's things. She made curtains for the window and hung drawings on the walls that she had sketched herself. "It is perfect," she declared, standing back to admire their work. Nathan wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "You are perfect. All of this, it is only possible because of you." "We did it together," Evelyn corrected. "Everything we have built here, we did it as partners." As Thomas grew into a toddler, bright and curious and full of energy, Nathan and Evelyn's love continued to deepen. They had their disagreements, of course, what married couple did not. But they had learned to talk through their problems, to listen to each other, to compromise. The foundation of respect and genuine affection they had built from the beginning of their marriage served them well. On their second wedding anniversary, Nathan gave Evelyn a gift that made her cry with joy, a set of fine china cups and saucers he had ordered special from Tucson. They were a deep green that matched her eyes, with delicate gold trim. "Nathan, these are too expensive," she protested even as she ran her fingers over them reverently. "Nothing is too expensive for you," he said firmly. "You left behind everything civilized to come here and marry a stranger. You have made this rough cabin into a home, raised our son, worked beside me through heat and drought and hardship, and never once complained. If I could give you the moon and stars, I would, but cups will have to do for now." Evelyn set the cups down carefully and threw her arms around him, kissing him with a passion that still made his heart race even after 2 years of marriage. "I do not need the moon and stars. I have everything I want right here." That night, after Thomas was asleep in his new room, they made love with the door to their bedroom open for the first time since he was born, no longer needing to muffle their sounds. It was a small freedom, but it felt significant, another sign of how their life was expanding and growing. The following winter brought hardship when a blizzard swept through the territory, unusual for Arizona but not unheard of. They were snowed in for 3 days, the temperature dropping far below freezing. Nathan worked constantly to keep the fire going and the livestock sheltered. One of the cows died from the cold despite his best efforts, a loss they could ill afford. But they survived, huddled together in the cabin with Thomas between them, telling stories and singing songs to pass the time. When the storm finally broke and Nathan was able to assess the damage, he found it could have been much worse. They had lost the cow, and some of the winter vegetables in the garden had frozen, but the cabin was sound and the other animals had made it through. "We will be all right," Evelyn assured him when she saw his worried face as he calculated their stores. "We have enough to get through to spring, and we can be more frugal with meals." "I hate that you have to go without because of my poor planning," Nathan said. "Nathan Pierce, look at me." Evelyn took his face in her hands and made him meet her eyes. "We are not going without. We have shelter, warmth, food enough to survive and each other. We have Thomas, healthy and happy. We are rich in all the ways that matter. One lost cow does not change that." Her words steadied him, as they so often did. She had a way of seeing clearly through his worries to what was truly important. "I love you," he said, not for the first time but meaning it just as much as the first time he had spoken those words. "I love you too. Now come, let us make the most of being snowed in and play with our son. He has been begging you to build blocks with him all morning." Nathan let himself be pulled into the simple joy of playing with Thomas, stacking wooden blocks Nathan had carved only to have the toddler knock them down with shrieks of laughter. Outside the wind howled, but inside the cabin was warm and filled with love. Spring brought new hope, as it always did. Evelyn began feeling sick in the mornings again, and they realized with joy that another baby was on the way. Thomas would have a little brother or sister before his 2nd birthday. "Our family is growing," Evelyn said. wonder in her voice as she rested her hand on her still flat stomach. "I always wanted more than one child, but I was afraid to hope." "Hope all you want," Nathan said, gathering her close. "We have made a good life here, better than I ever dreamed. There is room in our hearts and our home for another child, as many as you want to give me. Let us see how we manage with two before we start planning a whole houseful." Evelyn laughed. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Evelyn knew what to expect. She continued managing the household efficiently, while Nathan worked to expand their operation, adding more chickens and planning to buy another milk cow to replace the one they had lost in the blizzard. The territorial governor had started encouraging more settlement in the area, and new families were trickling into the region around Gila City. A real town was starting to develop, with a proper school now operating and even talk of bringing the railroad through. Nathan and Evelyn attended a community meeting where they met some of their new neighbors, forming connections that would serve them well in the years to come. One of the new arrivals was a doctor, much to everyone's relief. When Evelyn's time came in late November, Nathan was able to bring Dr. Wilson to attend the birth, easing his fears about the dangers of childbirth on the frontier. The labor was shorter this time, only 6 hours from start to finish. When Nathan was finally allowed into the bedroom, he found Evelyn sitting up, looking tired but triumphant, holding a baby wrapped in soft white cotton. "We have a daughter," she announced with a radiant smile. Nathan approached carefully and looked down at the tiny face, so different from Thomas's had been. Where their son had been red and angry-looking, their daughter was pink and peaceful, with a cap of auburn hair just like her mother's. "She is beautiful," Nathan whispered, reaching out to touch one delicate hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his thumb with surprising strength, and he felt his heart expand again, making room for this new person who had entered his life. "What should we name her?" Evelyn asked. "I was thinking about your mother. What was her name?" "Sarah," Nathan said, "but I would like to honor your mother too." "Margaret," Evelyn supplied. "Sarah Margaret Pierce. It is perfect." Thomas was fascinated by his new sister, wanting to touch her constantly with his small, not always gentle hands. Evelyn and Nathan had to watch him carefully, teaching him to be soft, to be careful. "Baby Sarah," he would say solemnly, patting her head with exaggerated care. The cabin felt full now in the best possible way, with the sounds of children filling the spaces that had once echoed with loneliness. Nathan would sometimes stop in the middle of work and just stand there, overwhelmed by gratitude for how much his life had changed. He thought back to that day in Gila City, when he had held a pink raffle ticket in his hand, uncertain and nervous about what it might bring. He could never have imagined this, could never have dreamed that the desperate measure of entering a raffle for a bride would lead to such profound happiness. The years flowed by like the Gila River, sometimes rushing, sometimes meandering, but always moving forward. Thomas grew into a sturdy boy who loved helping his father in the fields, trailing after Nathan with his own child-sized tools and copying everything he did. Sarah was a sweet-natured child who loved to sing and could often be found following her mother around, chattering constantly. When Thomas turned 6, he started attending the school in Gila City, riding in with Nathan twice a week for lessons. He proved to be a bright student, taking after Evelyn's quick mind. Sarah was already learning her letters from Evelyn at home, impatient to start school herself. Nathan and Evelyn's homestead prospered. The fields yielded well year after year, and they were able to expand their livestock. Nathan built a proper barn and even managed to buy a second horse. The cabin acquired more additions: a covered porch where they could sit in the evenings, a root cellar for storing food, an outdoor summer kitchen that kept the heat out of the main house. But more than the physical improvements, their marriage continued to grow stronger. They had weathered hardships together: drought years, illness, the everyday struggles of frontier life, and each challenge overcome had bonded them more tightly. Nathan still could not quite believe that this incredible woman was his wife, that she had chosen to build a life with him. On their 5th anniversary, they left the children with Tobias for the night and rode out to the spot where Nathan had first shown Evelyn the homestead. The cornfield was tall and green in the summer sun, rustling in the breeze. "You remember standing here that first time?" Nathan asked, his arm around Evelyn's waist. "I remember being terrified and trying not to show it," Evelyn admitted. "I remember thinking how vast and empty everything seemed, but also thinking that you had kind eyes and careful hands and maybe I would be all right." "Were you?" Nathan asked. "All right, I mean." Evelyn turned in his arms to face him fully. "Nathan, I have been more than all right. I have been happy. Truly, deeply happy. You gave me a home when I had none, a family when mine was gone, a purpose when I was adrift. You loved me when I was sure I would never know love again." "You gave me all of those things too," Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was so lonely before you came. I did not even realize how much until you filled all those empty spaces. You made my house a home, Evelyn. You made my life worth living." They stood there holding each other as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The land stretched out around them, their land, worked with their hands and watered with their sweat. In the distance, they could see the cabin with its additions, the barn, the well, all the evidence of their labor and their love. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked. "Getting on that stage, coming out here to marry a stranger?" "Not for one single moment," Evelyn said firmly. "Best decision I ever made. Even if I had known how hard it would be, I still would have come, because it brought me to you." Nathan kissed her then, long and deep, pouring all his love and gratitude into the kiss. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless and smiling. "We should probably head back," Evelyn said reluctantly, "before Tobias decides he is keeping our children." "He probably has spoiled them rotten already," Nathan agreed. "But let us stay just a moment longer." They stood together in the gathering darkness, watching the first stars appear in the vast Arizona sky. A coyote called in the distance, a sound that had once symbolized loneliness to Nathan but now was just part of the symphony of their life here. "I love you," Nathan said softly. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond, if there is anything beyond." "I love you too," Evelyn whispered back. "Thank you for winning that raffle." Nathan laughed, the sound carried away on the warm evening breeze. "Thank you for being the prize." The winter when Thomas was 9 and Sarah was 7, Evelyn realized she was pregnant again. They had thought their family was complete, but this unexpected blessing was welcomed with joy. Nathan worried about Evelyn, who was now 31 and had not been pregnant in 7 years, but Dr. Wilson assured them that she was healthy and strong. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2. Evelyn was more tired, more prone to sickness. Nathan took on even more of the household work, enlisting Thomas and Sarah to help with chores. The children rose to the occasion beautifully, Thomas taking care of the animals with minimal supervision, and Sarah helping with cooking and cleaning. The baby arrived in early spring, just as the wildflowers were beginning to bloom across the mesa. This time it was another boy, strong and healthy, with dark hair and blue eyes that would eventually turn brown like Nathan's. "What do you think of the name Daniel?" Evelyn asked as she recovered in bed, the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Daniel Pierce," Nathan tested it. "I like it." "Daniel Robert, perhaps, after Tobias's real name, Tobias, who had become like family over the years, was deeply touched when they told him, "You are naming your son after me. You are the one who gave me that raffle ticket," Nathan reminded him. "If not for you, none of this would exist. We owe you more than we can say." Daniel proved to be a calm, easy baby, which was fortunate given how busy the household had become. Thomas doted on his baby brother, often carrying him around and entertaining him. Sarah made up songs to sing to him, her sweet voice soothing him when he was fussy. The homestead continued to thrive. Nathan had become known in the area as a reliable farmer, and other settlers often came to him for advice. Evelyn had started teaching reading and writing to some of the children whose families lived too far from town to attend school regularly, holding lessons in their cabin twice a week. When Arizona Territory officially became Arizona State in 1912, Nathan and Evelyn celebrated by making the journey to Tucson with their children to witness the festivities. It was the farthest they had traveled in years, and the children were wide-eyed at the size of the city and the crowds of people. "Can you imagine?" Evelyn said to Nathan as they watched the parade celebrating statehood. "When we married, this was barely a territory. Now it is a full state. We have been part of building something lasting." Nathan looked at his family Thomas, now a young man of 17 starting to think about his own future. Sarah at 15, beautiful and bright and full of dreams. And Daniel, just turned 3, already showing signs of his father's stubbornness and his mother's intelligence. "We have built more than we know," he said. "Not just this homestead, but a legacy. Our children and their children will be part of Arizona's future." As the years continued to pass, Nathan's hair turned gray and Evelyn's face acquired the gentle lines of age and laughter. Thomas married a girl from one of the neighboring homesteads and built his own cabin on the northern section of Nathan's land. Sarah went to Teachers College in Phoenix, returning to teach at the school in Gila City. Daniel showed every sign of wanting to take over the homestead when Nathan was ready to pass it on. On their 25th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration at the original cabin, now just the heart of a much larger compound. Children and grandchildren filled the house with noise and joy. Thomas's wife was pregnant with their third child. Sarah had brought her young man, a lawyer from Tucson, who seemed properly intimidated by Nathan's scrutiny. Daniel was courting the doctor's daughter, much to Dr. Wilson's approval. After the meal, after the stories and laughter, after the children had been put to bed, and the young people had drifted off to their own conversations, Nathan and Evelyn slipped away to walk out to their favorite spot overlooking the cornfield. The stars blazed overhead in the clear desert sky, the same stars that had shone on the night of their first kiss, on the nights they had walked with newborn babies, on countless evenings of their shared life. 25 years, Evelyn mused, leaning against Nathan. "Longer than I was alive before I met you." "Best 25 years of my life," Nathan said. "Every single day with you has been a gift, even the hard days," Evelyn teased gently. "The drought of '04, when Daniel broke his arm, when we lost the barn to that fire." "Even those," Nathan confirmed, "because we faced them together. We have built something real here, Evelyn, not just the homestead, but a family, a life, a love that has lasted." Evelyn turned to face him, her face lined now but still beautiful to him, her green eyes still bright and intelligent. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if someone else's ticket had been drawn that day?" "Never," Nathan said firmly. "It was always meant to be us. Fate, luck, divine intervention, whatever you want to call it, we were meant to find each other." "I believe that too," Evelyn said softly. "I was so lost when I came here, grieving and afraid. You helped me find myself again. You gave me a reason to live instead of just survive." "You did the same for me," Nathan said. "I was alive but not living, going through the motions day after day. You made me feel again, made me hope and dream and love." They stood together in the darkness, holding each other as they had for a quarter century, two people who had started as strangers and become each other's whole world. "Here is to 25 more years," Evelyn said. Nathan laughed. "We will be ancient if we make it that long." "Then we will be ancient together," Evelyn declared. "Growing old with you sounds like the perfect ending to our story, but it was not an ending," Nathan thought. It was just another chapter in a story that would continue through their children and grandchildren, through the land they had worked and the love they had built. The homestead would endure, a testament to what two lonely people had created when fate brought them together. As they walked back to the cabin, they could hear music and laughter drifting out into the night. Their family, their legacy, their love made manifest in every voice and every smile. Nathan thought back one last time to that day in Gila City, to the pink ticket in his hand and the terrified young woman stepping off the stage. He thought about all the moments since then, the first awkward conversations, the first kiss, the first time she said she loved him. The births of their children, the building of their home, the quiet everyday moments of simply living life together. He had won her in a raffle, but she had won his heart completely and irrevocably. And in the end, they had both won everything that truly mattered. Years later, when Nathan was an old man with grandchildren and great-grandchildren playing at his feet, he would tell them the story of how he met their grandmother. They would listen wide-eyed as he described the raffle, the stagecoach, the first moment he saw Evelyn's green eyes. They would giggle at the awkwardness of those early days and sigh over the romance that bloomed. "Was it love at first sight, Grandpa?" one of the little ones always asked. "No," Nathan would answer honestly, Evelyn's hand warm in his. "But it was something just as good. It was the beginning of love, and that beginning led to everything we have today." Evelyn would smile and add her own perspective. "Your grandfather was kind from the first moment. He treated me with respect and patience when he could have treated me like property he had won. That kindness made it possible for love to grow." The children would eventually drift away to their play, and Nathan and Evelyn would sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over the land they had tamed together. The homestead spread out before them, now managed primarily by Daniel and his family, but still theirs in every way that mattered. "Any regrets?" Nathan would ask, a question that had become a ritual between them over the years. "Not a single one," Evelyn would always answer. "You?" "Only that I did not buy that ticket sooner," Nathan would say, making her laugh as he had intended. When Nathan died at the age of 78, he passed peacefully in his sleep with Evelyn beside him, his hand clasped in hers as it had been for over 50 years. His last conscious thought was gratitude for the life he had lived, for the woman he had loved, for the family they had created. Evelyn mourned him deeply, but not desperately. They had been granted more years together than many couples received, and those years had been full of love and purpose. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the matriarch of a family that had put down deep roots in Arizona soil. When her time came, she faced it with the same courage she had shown in stepping onto that stagecoach so many years before. Her last words, spoken to Daniel, who sat beside her bed, were about Nathan. "Tell your children," she whispered, "that love can be found in the most unexpected places, that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the greatest rewards, and that a good marriage, built on respect and kindness and genuine affection, is the finest thing a person can have in this life." She closed her eyes and slipped away peacefully, and those who believed in such things said that Nathan was waiting for her on the other side, ready to continue their journey together. The homestead remained in the Pierce family for generations, each one adding to what Nathan and Evelyn had started. The original cabin was preserved and maintained, a memorial to the love story that had begun there. Visitors would come to hear the tale of the lonely homesteader who won a bride in a raffle and found his heart's desire in the woman who arrived. It became a local legend, the kind of story people told to prove that true love existed, that fate could be kind, that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unlikely circumstances. Young couples would visit the homestead on their wedding day for good luck, hoping that their own marriages would be as strong and lasting as Nathan and Evelyn's had been. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Arizona desert painting the sky in brilliant colors, some swore they could see two figures standing at the edge of the old cornfield, hand in hand, looking out over the land they had loved and the legacy they had built together. Whether it was truly their spirits or just a trick of the light and a testament to how deeply their story had woven itself into the fabric of that place, no one could say for certain. But the love they had shared, the life they had built, the family they had created that was real and lasting, proof that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a simple act of faith, a pink raffle ticket, and two lonely hearts willing to take a chance on each other. The end of their mortal story was just the beginning of their legacy, one that would endure as long as the desert winds blew across the Arizona territory they had helped build, as long as their descendants walked the earth, as long as people believed in the transformative power of love. And so the story of Nathan Pierce and Evelyn Warner, the lonely homesteader and the raffle bride who won each other's hearts, lived on, a testament to the enduring truth that love, when nurtured with patience and kindness and genuine care, could overcome any obstacle and create something beautiful that would outlast even death itself.